Australia is the land of the great outdoors. Every day, Australians and tourists make the most of the natural beauty. In the bush, the skies, and on the beaches. But without warning, these innocent pursuits can turn deadly. In this episode, human endurance pushed to the limit.
At that point, I had the thought, this is it for me. This is my life done.
Heartbreaking tragedies and unbelievable escapes. On land, in the water, and in the air.
We don't base jump because we've got a death wish. We base jump because we want to experience life in a slightly different angle.
It's pretty dangerous.
On Savage Australia, Deadly Pursuits.
Australia is one of the wildest places, wildest continents on the planet. In every way you want to measure it. We're dry, we're flat, we're remote, we've got beautiful oceans, we've got incredible landscapes, and we've got incredible people who want to experience and interact with those landscapes.
Every year, millions of locals and tourists spend their summers at the beach, swimming and surfing. Keeping them safe are the famous bronzed Aussie Lifesavers, highly trained volunteers who risk their own lives to rescue swimmers from the punishing waves and powerful currents.
Hustle between the red and yellow, folks. The rip's pulling towards the left there.
From its inception in 1906, surf lifesaving enjoyed a perfect record with not a single drowning death.
The surf bathers along these beaches enjoy their bathing in comparative safety, owing to the fact that they are constantly under the vigilant eye of the lifesavers who patrol these beaches.
But one fateful day in 1938, Aussie lifesavers were tested like never before, or since. A day known forever as Black Sunday. Bondi Beach, Saturday, February 5th. A beautiful summer's day. The first Empire Games had opened at the Sydney Cricket Ground, and tourists flocked to the city in holiday mode. Bondi Beach was experiencing huge swells. The surf lifesavers even set a new record, 74 rescues in a single hour. On Sunday the 6th, despite the seas still being fierce, the inspectors opened the beach, knowing there'd be huge crowds wanting to cool off at Sydney's most famous destination. And as the mercury rose, 35,000 people descended on the Bondi sands. Sundays were surfboat race days for the lifesavers, unless the sea was deemed too rough.
The race is on.
But on Black Sunday, lifesaving captain Carl Jefferson made a decision that proved pivotal.
Luckily that morning when I was asked about the race, I said, yes, we'd have it. It was only a sort of luck decision. It could have gone either way. But that resulted in the fact that at that time at 3 o'clock, we had 60 members of our club on the beach, ready to enter this race. We had 2 patrols on, one just coming off, one going away, so we had a double-strength patrol.
At 3 o'clock, as the race boats were setting up, 3 freak waves struck without warning. They crashed over a sandbank, leaving swimmers out of their depth and struggling.
What happened was then a lot of people that were swimming in that area and standing safely got swept into the deep water. At that point, there was absolute panic. It was absolute chaos. Within the space of about 20 minutes, 200 people needed to be rescued.
But while the lifesavers tried to do their job, there was a problem they hadn't counted on.
What went against the rescue on that day, of course, the public, in their endeavour to help, they raced through and grabbed the lines, in addition to the lifesavers who were on the lines at the time, and pulled them in. And they're pulling them in all kinds of directions, you see. And naturally enough, they knotted. And This impeded quite a few rescues.
It was chaos. The sea was a mass of bodies as hundreds struggled against the undertow. The rescuers were doing their best, but there simply weren't enough belts or boats. Many lifesavers were themselves in peril, as victims clawed at the boats in desperation. At one point, over 20 people were strewn along the beach, receiving urgent mouth-to-mouth. The lifesavers struggled to cope. One man made the ultimate sacrifice. Lifting a young girl high above his head, he managed to keep her out of the powerful currents, but lost his own life.
Everyone came running down to help, and it's amazing with that sort of equipment that there weren't more lives lost.
Every day, up to 17,000 rips can be found on Australian beaches. And they are insanely powerful. About 10,000 people are pulled from the rips by lifesavers each year.
You see that sign just behind you?
Yeah.
That's right in front of that rip there, okay? Very dangerous where there's no breaking waves.
Well, rips are dangerous because they're almost like rivers in the sea. And they sit in channels, narrow channels, and they flow fast.
Rips are caused by waves coming into the shore and returning to the sea. As the water heads back out, it finds the deepest channel, creating a rapidly flowing and deadly current. Rips are hard to spot, but nearly every beach in Australia will have one. To survive a rip, raise your hand so lifesavers can see you. And remember, panic is a killer. It's not just coasts and beaches. Tragedy in the water can strike inland, and hiking in remote areas can be a dangerous pursuit. In 1990, a school excursion left Hobart, travelling deep into the Tasmanian wilderness to explore Mystery Creek Cave. But they were walking into a death trap.
When they went in, the water was described as being ankle deep to shin deep. And it had been raining apparently since about 10 o'clock the night before, and the water level in the cave had risen very, very little. And unfortunately, they were only in there for a period of a couple of hours when there was probably a 3 feet rise in the water in the cave.
The flash flood caught them by surprise. One student stumbled into the deluge, and when another student tried to help, they were both swept away. A teacher went after the two girls. All three of them drowned. Rescuers couldn't get to the rest of the party until the waters subsided the next morning. In 2003, the Stellard family of Western Australia set off for an afternoon's rock fishing on the brutal shores of Black Point, a perfect fishing spot, but known for its treacherous seas and razor-sharp rocks. Deborah was fishing with her husband and 2 sons when she stepped over a crevice just as a wave struck the rocks. Her feet were washed from underneath her and she was knocked into the turbulent waters. Their 25-year-old son, Paul, dived in to rescue her. Then 18-year-old Andrew followed with a rope. The father, Ron, was pulling them in from the shore. He almost had them, but then another massive wave struck and all 3 were torn away from him.
The last time he saw of them was they were drifting past him, face down in the water. And, I mean, that must have been, God, it must have been one of your worst nightmares. My brother then had to make a choice between jumping in or going in himself versus the young family he had still at home. There were still 5 children at home.
The bodies of Deborah and Andrew were recovered, but Paul's was never located. A total of 158 fishermen drowned along the Australian coastline in the 13 years to 2017. Only 1% were wearing a life jacket. Fortunately, life jackets are now compulsory while rock fishing at many high-risk locations throughout Australia. Another high adrenaline sport pursuit is spearfishing. It has all the thrills of cave diving, but without the safety gear. A more extreme version of the sport is free diving, where divers take a huge gulp of air before travelling as deep as they possibly can. They routinely descend to 20 metres and stay down for minutes on just one breath. In 2014, Jack Gallagher and Aaron Strickland set out on a free dive in the sea off Cairns. This actual footage shows Aaron chasing a dog-toothed tuna down to depths of 17 metres, but the fish was proving hard to catch.
My gut feeling was that he was never going to get the fish. It was a sort of, right in the distance.
At the last moment, the fish turned, and Aaron managed to snag it with his spear. But then the powerful tuna began to drag him deeper. As he plunged towards the ocean floor, Aaron's lungs began to fill with water. He started to suffocate and fell unconscious.
His eyes were just rolled back in his head, and it was pretty sort of graphic.
Seeing his friend sinking to certain death, Jack dived after him and managed to haul him back to the surface.
Breathe out. And breathe. And breathe.
For 2 minutes, Jack frantically tried to revive his mate with mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, but he was just a dead weight in his arms. Soon, another fisherman arrived in a boat.
Oi! Wake up! And breathe, bro.
That's when it sort of all hit me, I might not be getting him back.
Finally, signs of life.
And breathe, you right? And breathe. He's all right. Breathe, mate, breathe. Hang on to the boat.
He had blacked out and had no idea where he was.
Yeah, pretty much. You weren't coming back unless you had to get out.
He was taken to the nearest hospital with saltwater aspiration and was in danger of getting pneumonia. Aaron survived the deadly ordeal thanks to his friend's quick intervention. While the water inspires the pursuit of extreme sport, so too does the air. The red deserts of Alice Springs in Central Australia look spectacular at sunrise. Seeing them from a hot air balloon is a major tourist attraction. On the 13th of August 1989, early in the morning, a group of tourists set off on a sightseeing adventure with local operator Toddy's. The balloon's basket was packed to capacity. There were 13 tourists in all, eager to view the sun coming up over the desert. But 15 kilometres south of Alice Springs, the balloon ran into trouble.
Oh, collision.
The Toddy's balloon collided with another hot air balloon in mid-air. The upper balloon's basket brushed the lower Toddy's balloon, tearing a huge hole in it. The lower balloon instantly began to collapse.
I couldn't believe what I was seeing when the balloon just completely deflated and plummeted straight down to the earth. I can assure you it was sickening sight.
Rescue crews rushed to the scene of the crash, but it was too late.
On arrival here, the scene was checked and it was found that all persons on board had been killed on impact.
The tragedy was the world's worst balloon disaster for years, and the worst in Australia to this day. Australia is a land of extremes, and people are drawn from around the globe to exploit them.
A lot of people around the world who are into this high-altitude extreme sport envy us here in Australia, this incredible natural resource we have right over our heads.
Adventure tourism is a growing industry in Australia, with new ways for thrill seekers to get their kicks by living dangerously. Skydiving from a helicopter over Rottnest Island in Western Australia is one popular pursuit. The divers fall towards Earth at a heart-stopping rate of 200 kilometres per hour. combines breathtaking views with a real adrenaline rush.
And we're starting to realise more and more that what we thought were the limits, they've just been blown apart.
That was awesome! Wow!
But even skydiving, which is heavily regulated, has its share of fatalities. In 2001, a skydiving training session turned deadly when 11 skydivers set off for a jump in central Victoria. One of the divers, Simon Lean, had over 10 years' experience.
As I was climbing out, getting ready to exit the plane, it looked as though Simon's reserve pin got dislodged, opening his reserve parachute and dragging him out of the door.
Simon was pulled from the plane and things turned even nastier.
His parachute entangled with the tail section. It bent about 45 degrees and then it was a couple of seconds afterwards tore off with him still attached. I was scared. That's not something you like to see.
Simon plummeted to the ground from 4,000 metres. He died from massive injuries soon after impact.
When I saw him land, I was still hoping and that he would be okay. I knew he was going to be hurt, but to what extent, I wouldn't know. And it's very unfortunate that he did die.
Barry's tangled chute sent the plane into a tailspin and it hurtled towards the ground with 10 skydivers still on board.
I believe they were just fighting their way out, basically, to get out the door.
As the plane spun downwards, amazingly the pilot, Barry Dawson, managed to hold the aircraft steady, allowing the skydivers to jump out. But the increasing G-forces prevented his own escape.
The door had jammed shut and I couldn't get it open. I thought, oh, yeah, I did. I thought I was going to go in and I don't know, just...
It was only the thought of his wife and newborn baby that kept him going. Through sheer force, he managed to get the door open. He jumped from the plane seconds before it crashed and burst into flames.
One more second in that plane and I would have been part of it.
And to get himself out of an aircraft with the G-forces sort of holding him inside the plane and to get the door open and get himself out, it's a pretty incredible feat.
Without the heroic actions of pilot Barry Dawson, all 10 remaining skydivers would have been killed.
We've got a whole plane load of jumpers in the plane, and yeah, worst case scenario could have been that whole plane load of perished, and it would not have been nice.
The incident proved that even for experienced skydivers, the skies are never truly safe. Humans are always searching for new ways to up their thrill factor. One of the most intense sports is wingsuit jumping.
Wingsuit is an inflatable fabric suit that when it inflates, it becomes the shape of a wing and it flies through the air like a wing, generates lift, and you can get out of a plane or jump off a cliff and fly for kilometres. Air is rammed into inlet vents on the suit, and that's what pumps it up into the shape of the wing.
Wingsuits are extremely sophisticated, featuring cutting-edge aerodynamics.
The stuff we've been doing, even for wingsuiting, it's quite pioneering.
To be able to fly a wingsuit in Australia, you have to be a qualified skydiver. It takes years to develop the skill set necessary to go wingsuit skydiving. That training plus the technology that we use is how we manage the risk.
Glenn Singleman is one of the top extreme sport athletes in Australia, a joint world record holder in base jumping and wingsuit flying. His day job is an emergency doctor, so he's used to staring death in the face. He and his wife, Heather Swan, have been passionate wingsuit flyers for years. And for them, it's all about the adrenaline rush.
You fly like a bird, like an eagle, like a hawk, like you imagined it was when you were a kid. It is personal human flight. There is nothing like it except being a bird.
We can be up there and be flying around the clouds, geeking at each other, barrel rolling, playing with the birds. That's just fun. It makes me happy.
So there's the savage part of Australia that most people don't even know about. It's right above our head. In winter, the polar jet stream comes up from Antarctica between 15 and 40,000 feet. It's howling like a gale at 150 knots. And we wanted to use that high altitude jet stream wind as a tailwind to break the distance record in a wingsuit.
So in 2016, they planned to leap from a hot air balloon, 39,000 feet above the central desert. At that altitude, they were going to need oxygen.
So worst case scenario, the oxygen fails at 39,000 feet. We've got about a minute of useful consciousness before we become incapacitated.
If oxygen starvation was not enough, the flyers had to protect their bare flesh from temperatures of -50.
The exposed skin freezes in about 30 seconds, especially with a lot of wind blowing over it, like when we're flying in the wingsuits.
Yeah. You know, if anything happens, I can fly to there and back.
There was one man they were trusting with their lives, John, the balloon pilot.
I have some familiarity with the environment, but I'm still nervous about it. I am, genuinely concerned and want to make sure we get it absolutely right.
We're really trusting a lot to John, and we're also trusting that he won't be hypoxic, that he won't be incapacitated. But if any of that happens, we just don't get out. Just come down.
At 4 a.m, the balloon was ready for action.
This is the moment of truth. This is always the most nerve-wracking time. And yeah, I do feel nervous now.
The couple spent an hour sucking in extra oxygen to prepare for the extreme altitude. Finally, the balloon set off in the early hours of the morning. When the balloon reached the correct altitude, Swan and Singleman stepped out onto the narrow platform with the Earth far below them. The temperature was -53 degrees. The pilot began the tricky procedure of switching their air supply to their own cylinders.
Let's change the rubber, guys.
Singleman began to slump due to lack of oxygen. He passed out and fell off the platform into thin air. Heather Swan tried to follow him, but the pilot pulled her back into the basket.
Sorry to do that to you, Heather.
The two left in the hot air balloon had no idea what had happened to Glenn.
Oscar Park, there is only one skydiver. Confirming Heather is still in the balloon.
Somehow Glenn regained consciousness as he fell and miraculously steered himself safely to the red sands below. Rescuers found him alive and well. The balloon, however, was struggling to land as severe 30-knot winds flung them across the desert.
Landing in a hot air balloon when it's windy is really treacherous. We were dragged across the ground, smashed into trees.
Finally, the pilot was able to crash land the balloon.
I said to them, why didn't you let me out?
This is Heather's first balloon landing.
Wow.
And the last.
You guys all right?
It took a miracle.
God,
You left without me.
That landing made...
But Glenn and Heather were reunited. Despite the mishaps, Singleman still broke several records, including the highest balloon flight and parachute drop in Australia. He also shattered the world record for the highest wingsuit jump. Wingsuit flying is heavily regulated and requires meticulous safety checks and government approvals. It's why there have been no wingsuit deaths in Australia. Another extreme group of thrill seekers in Australia are the base jumpers.
So base jumping is jumping off fixed objects with a parachute. Most people who do base jumps have done lots and lots of skydiving out of planes, so they know how parachutes work. But still, it's pretty dangerous. In Australia, base jumping is not legal.
It's not only illegal, it's lethal. But base jumpers don't seem to realise that every time they leap from a cliff or building, it could be the last thing they ever do.
Base jumping's not a sport. that you get into thinking, okay, this is going to kill me. It's like anything. I mean, if you were to enter any sort of activity knowing full well you're going to die, why are you going to do it?
Sydney's North Head is a popular spot for base jumpers, with sandstone cliffs rising to a height of 90 metres. Many have died here.
Extremely dangerous, verging on stupid. That area has claimed 2 lives in the last month, as it is.
The base jumpers use only a rope and swing down 100 metres to the pounding surf and jagged rocks, narrowly missing the cliff face. One British base jumper, Gareth Jones, fell to his death in 2013. He posted a photo of his legs dangling above the very rocks where he would die 2 days later, but not from base jumping. After climbing over a safety fence to view the sunrise with friends, he slipped over the edge, plunging 90 metres to his death.
The wind around there is very unpredictable. It's certainly no place to be playing.
Despite the death toll, these adrenaline junkies keep returning to the North Head cliffs. Base jumpers will travel deep into national parks to find the highest launching point to jump. The Blue Mountains outside of Sydney has some of the most seductive cliffs.
I guess every aspect of the sport really excites me. I love anticipating the jump, driving to the exit point, hanging out with my friends, jumping, who all share the same interests as me, and building up to it, finally getting there and going off is almost, it's hard to describe.
Base jumpers live for adrenaline, and the anticipation of the jump is a big part of the thrill.
Completely dry mouth, legs shaking, you can hear your heart in your ears, and every sense is telling you, don't do this, it's not right. And it's at that point that you send to yourself, you know, this is it, I'm making the conscious decision, I'm going.
Yeah! Woo!
As you leap off, you cross over from the world that you know to the world beyond. And it's a feeling which you cannot describe to anyone unless they have done it.
Part of the attraction of base jumping is that you jump into stillness. It's like jumping into velvet, and you just accelerate into this space. And that's a special moment. It's a really peaceful moment of freedom because you're free of gravity.
Stepping off the edge of that cliff is just, it's indescribable. Yeah, the visuals you get when you're falling down the side, the cliff's going past you, oh, and the wind in your face. It's just, it's living. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Your mind goes blank and your brain actually slows down. You're able to compute everything really slowly because everything feels like you're running in slow motion.
Ready, set, go.
We don't base jump because we've got a death wish. We base jump because we want to experience life in a slightly different angle.
One of Australia's top base jumpers was Jason Fitzherbert.
I'd much rather die in pursuit of, travelling the world, jumping off stuff, experiencing life to its fullest, being healthy, fit, outdoors.
He was very skilled and very knowledgeable. He'd done over 800 jumps and had jumped in countries all over the world. He taught me a lot of what I know, especially about the more advanced and difficult jumps.
On October 30th, 2004, Jason Fitzherbert and his partner, Lavia Dickey, headed to Goulburn to attend the funeral of another base jumper. On the way, Jason Fitzherbert decided to go for a jump at the notorious Bungonia Gorge.
Jason was going to be trying a new jump that he hadn't tried at that site. That morning he was very focused and very determined.
But the jump went terribly wrong. He didn't have enough distance from the cliff wall. Slamming into the cliff face at a tremendous speed, he died instantly. Despite losing her partner, Lavia returned to base jumping days later. Jason isn't the only one to lose his life base jumping at Bungonia Gorge. Another thrill-seeking duo were Julia Stephan and Shane Rivette. Shane made a living out of filming his high-flying, daring feats. He was famous for parachuting off vertical cliff faces. He'd already survived 2 plane crashes and won a world record for the largest flag carry under parachute. He videoed himself abseiling down the fearsome Bungonia Gorge. The Gorge, with its spectacular bluffs, was one of his favourite jumps, even though it had claimed the life of one of his students. His parachute ropes had twisted and he slammed into the cliff wall, dying instantly. Undeterred, Shane Rivette continued climbing and base jumping all over the Gorge.
He had a really huge respect for the place. To him, the place was just awesome, beautiful. I think it was a very personal relationship he had with the place.
In May 1993, he scaled 200 metres down the cliff. Then the sun set and the gorge went completely dark. Shane lost his balance and fell to his death.
Did you hear anything?
Yeah, I hear. He said first it and and just the noise, because on the bottom you have an echo. Oh, it's terrible.
It's a shame that it is illegal, because it does attract a kind of outlaw mystique and an outlaw element.
Base jumpers don't just operate in the great outdoors. The lure of the city is also strong. They often break into buildings at night so they can leap off the top undetected. One of those free-falling cowboys was Jason Rooney, who flouted the law with every jump. Late one night, he climbed the fire escape of a 19-storey building on the Gold Coast. Down below, a small audience cheered him on. But a wind suddenly blew him off course and he smacked into a tree.
The tree come at me from nowhere. I flared. I managed to get my legs in front of it.
All evidence of the illegal jump was cleared before the police arrived.
We got away, all being well, no police had turned up. Boy, we had fun.
Rooney performed all kinds of thrilling aerial stunts, such as dropping from a balloon in a hang glider, then parachuting down to earth. He also jumped off the Mooney Mooney Bridge on the New South Wales Central Coast. To increase the challenge, he jumped with a friend in a harness only built for one.
And I'm jumping on equipment designed for one person. So obviously we cannot land on land because we'd end up with spinal injuries. So we're going to attempt to swing it into the water where we've got a frogman to pick us out.
Risking a hefty fine and without a reserve parachute, they jumped from the centre of the bridge. This time, he made it, but his luck was running out. In 1991, Rooney jumped off Blues Point Tower, a 26-storey building in Sydney.
That's where he's going. It's about 200 foot by all accounts.
Then 2 years later, he climbed to the same roof to repeat the jump. But this time, it went wrong. His parachute didn't open and he plunged to the ground.
Just as I went to sit down, I saw a big, I thought it was a bag of garbage go flying past the window. A split second later, I heard a really loud thud.
Rooney died on impact.
I don't know why I didn't pull it off. He should have made that one.
It didn't look like it was a planned jump because, well, one of his shoes was missing. The parachute didn't appear to be open.
Police say finger marks on the roof suggest Rooney fell before he was ready and had tried to claw his way back.
There are very definite limits built into the rules and regulations, but there are, very obvious limits that you wouldn't want to exceed in terms of the weather, in terms of the conditions. And sometimes you just get that feeling of, I'm not on top of my game today, so maybe I'll just give it a miss. Everything's going to be there tomorrow.
Rooney died the day before he was due to leave Australia for England. His visa had expired. It's not just extreme sports that claim lives in the savage Australian terrain. The picturesque but deadly Wedding Cake Rock in Sydney's Royal National Park is a dangerously unstable cliff face. In 2015, 2 young men fell from the cliff top, landing on a ledge below. Unable to climb back up, they found themselves perched on the edge of a sheer drop. After a perilous 1-hour rescue operation involving an air ambulance and emergency crews, the men were rescued, with one being winched to safety due to spinal injuries.
I'm fascinated by human performance, and the more we understand, the more we realise that the old limits are just being shattered. We're understanding that the human body is able to adapt to extreme environments much better than we thought it could, so that it is possible to run, you know, ultramarathon events in the middle of the desert, in the middle of Antarctica, in these extreme places.
In 2011, 41 super fit athletes took part in a gruelling ultramarathon across the Australian Outback. A 100-kilometre torture test through the bush and desert of Western Australia's rugged Kimberley region. But as competitors raced along, a raging grass fire was burning out of control just kilometres away. Desperate warnings to organisers failed to get through.
It was coming over the range, it was about 2 kilometres away, and it would be on them in 2 hours.
Race organisers either misread or ignored the warning signs.
The fire has been extinguished, so there are no more fires. Well, a little bit next to the road, but everything should be okay.
But it wasn't okay. Runners were waved through checkpoints without any warnings.
Quite a decent grass fire that you can hear.
Even the front runners were concerned.
The fire's pretty bad. There's a lot of kind of smog happening as well. It's fire, like it can be really volatile. The wind can change, and it was moving with quite speed. And the flames weren't just like on the ground; they were quite high.
But the race went on.
It is stinking hot. They put us running through a fire. So.
It got a brief mention, but not something that was impressed upon us that was, vitally important or some, a big danger issue to be very careful of.
Alice Caffin and partner Heather Scott kept racing until it became apparent they were in trouble.
It was very late. It was to the point where the smoke was right in our face and we could hear the fire, and we thought, this is actually a problem.
The course was leading athletes straight into the heart of the fire.
We just climbed up a 150-meter embankment so that we could get out of the line of the fire. But otherwise, our trail was sending us right through there. And if Ellis wasn't smarter, we'd be down there right now.
So we're still up on the ridge line, and now it started climbing up around us.
You've realized at that point you're not going to outrun it. And at that point, I had the thought, this is it for me. This is my life done.
But they were the lucky ones. Taria Pitt and Kate Sanderson followed the course into a gorge, unaware the fire was blocking their exit. Right behind them were Hal Benson and Michael Hull.
I heard this big noise. I thought it was a road train, and I looked up and I just saw this massive wall of fire and smoke, where the flames were about 2 metres away from us, and it was just horrendously hot, and we were scared for our lives.
Surrounded by flames, the runners headed for higher ground.
So we headed for one of the escarpments because we thought there was a better chance of survival up there because there was a little less fuel to be burnt.
Hal led the way, but Michael and the girls got trapped halfway up the hill. With the fire bearing down on them, they faced an agonising choice: be overtaken by the flames or charge back into the fire front.
What we did instantaneously was just stop and just ran back in through the wall of flame, because we knew that the flame that was high, when you're on the other side of it, there was nothing left to burn. So if we can just get through that, it was our best way of survival.
Less than 1 kilometre away, Heather and Ellis were confronted by the same dilemma.
It was a case of we may have to jump through flames and get burnt somewhat. It's better than sitting there and waiting, you know, for the worst, so that's all you can do.
For stamps, this is what it's come down to. Walking into a burnt area to avoid getting burnt ourselves.
We were very lucky. I felt like I had just escaped death.
But for Taria and Kate, the tactic changed their lives forever.
And then I looked down and the fire just blazing up the hill. And I just had to just put my hands on my face and just the fire hit. And it just set my shoulder alight. So without thinking, I just stood up just to get to it. And then the fire just came around me and I knew I was gonna die. I just knew.
Kate was just a little bit behind me and I think the flames just licked her just as she turned, so hence the back of her was just horrendous. And then the other girl, Taria, I think she stumbled on a couple of rocks, so she was actually in the fire just for that little second longer as well. So that's why their burns were so horrific.
The two girls lay in excruciating pain on the scorching rocks.
The girls are just screaming in pain. It's like, we were helpless, nothing we could do.
There's one point after a few hours, they just sort of said, when is someone going to come? This is so painful. We're getting sunburnt.
But help would not arrive for hours.
I find it hard to imagine what it would have been like in over 30-degree temperatures with extensive burns, limited water.
A rescue helicopter tried to set down in the unforgiving terrain and failed. But a second chopper pulled off a daring landing on one skid.
I've been a paramedic for the last 6 years, and I've seen burns, but those are some of the worst I've seen. And what was amazing is they were still walking at that stage, and just, with the severe burns, it was quite a testament to how tough those girls are.
4 hours after the brutal bushfire, the athletes finally arrived at hospital. While some had suffered significant injuries, for the girls, it was much worse. Kate Sanderson spent 6 months in hospital and had to learn to walk again.
I had my left foot amputated. I've had my licence taken off me. I can't work.
Taria Pitt, who was a mining engineer before the accident, had her life turned upside down.
I can't feed myself, wash myself, dress myself.
Although she suffered burns to 65% of her body and had 7 fingers amputated, Taria went on to run marathons, write books and inspire many. A government inquiry found the race organisers had been negligent in ensuring the safety of the runners on that terrible day.
Australia is full of these wild, savage but beautiful places, and being here in Australia is a great place to experience incredible beauty, incredible natural phenomena that you don't see anywhere else. I mean, where else can you fly over a gigantic salt lake the size of a state? That's only in Australia. It's incredibly beautiful. Where else can you fly over a coastline that goes to infinity with the Southern Ocean breaking in giant swells? I mean, you know, where else has the Great Barrier Reef? It's you know, it's just a land of extraordinary natural beauty.